I would like for the church to gather around real close. I have a story to tell you. This story is real, and also it contains a whole lot of information that you don't know. Number one, I'd like to tell you where I first got my burden for foreign missions. That's what we used to call it. Now we call it global missions. I was a 16-year-old guy raised in Section 4 in Vernon Parish, Louisiana. And I attended the last service of Brother and Sister Freeman when they were sailing to Africa. Then you went, not to come back, but to stay. And I loved the Freemans. They were some of my favorite people early as a young lad. And so I thought they were going away, and we cried like they'd never come back. But that made an impression on me. They would take their family and sail to an unknown land. So I pondered that in my heart, and I kept it until when I came to Jackson, which was actually voted in the month of July, 1962, the 29th of July, 1962. I'm leaping forward, but just let you know, so you will know, and not soon forget, especially the church people that I'm talking to now, not soon forget what our mission is about. In fact, if you'll just look up at the baptistry, you'll see the word mission. It has forever been in our church. And what that meant was not just across the street, but around the world. Of course, I know if you don't have a burden for across the street, you won't have a burden for around the world. Now back to my story. When I graduated from high school, I wanted to go to a Bible school. And I went to International Bible College, called it IBC then, in 1950. And I didn't think I would stay. Right in the middle of the Korean War. In fact, two of my friends, my very special friends, one volunteered and the other was drafted. They went from the high school platform to Fort Polk, which was not far from our home. They trained. One went to Korea and was dead in 6 months. So being a patriotic family, I sure hated to go to Bible school, especially then, because it looked like I'm running from something. I was running to God. I knew that, but I didn't know how it would look. So I went to this Bible school in San Antonio, Texas, called International Bible College. It was literally built on missions. I loved it. And I didn't want to stay there either. When I got there, I kept my bags packed for probably 3 or 4 months. They elected me president of the first year class and also the missions department. And we had missionaries and so forth come. And I always prayed in the chapel and never forgot the call of God that became my call earlier. I went from there to Apostolic Bible Institute in St. Paul, Minnesota, all the time knowing that I probably would not stay in America, but somewhere in the mission field, because it never got out of my soul. And so, when I graduated from Bible school, there was a little incident that happened that I doubt if any of the church folks have heard this. Let me tell you. I had bought a 1937 Ford. In fact, I have one like it now in the garage. And MacArthur was returning to the United States. In fact, his 14-year-old son had never set foot on American soil. He was sitting at a big table in Tokyo. And the commander-in-chief, which was Truman, sent him a telegram. You're now relieved of your foreign command come home. The famous plane, the baton, we called it because it, with two A's, some people say A. Loaded up the baton, they stopped on a couple of islands, and they were to land on the West Coast at 10:30, April 15th, 1951. And my little car sat on a hill, a little mountain in San Antonio, 4,000 Woodlawn Drive. Charles Fee and I were best of friends. We roomed together and we would preach together in different places until we graduated. So, after I tell you this to lay a foundation, I never got it out of my soul what God had given me when I was a 16-year-old guy, but I did not know what to do. So I graduated from St. Paul and built a church, West Texas, South Louisiana, and from there, Brother Gamblin wanted me to come to Jackson. Well, I figured I'd be here 3 or 4 years, and I'd be on the foreign field somewhere with my family. I discussed it with my first wife, Mary Frances. Of course, you that know us know that she passed away 15 years ago. And we just didn't want to know where to go and when. And waiting for God to speak, God gave me a dream. Now this dream, you need to back up and think about it just a little. It's the most unusual dream I believe I've ever heard in my life. I dreamed I was pregnant, and I carried the child to full term. I went to the hospital, and it's time for the baby to be delivered. And the doctor and the nurse were busy about certain things, and the baby was born. I reached over and found some scissors, cut the umbilical cord, tied it as good as I could, and then they found what was going on. They put the little boy up on my stomach, and I reached to pick him up, and he was a little brown baby boy. Well, I hid the dream to everybody except my wife. She said, maybe we're going to go somewhere. I said, yeah, we will. Well, I figured I would go to Korea. Back in that 37 Ford, I told Charles, I'm going to build a Bible school in Korea. This war will wind down someday, but we didn't know how. So, as time went on, God began to deal with me about missions. If I can't go, at least I can give. And there's 3 ways to remember this. You either go, give, or groan. Really praying about it. And so I got the call from Korea. Said, would you come over and preach a crusade? Well, of course the answer was yes. I went, and the story by Korea's standards is big enough all by itself. But most of the people in our church don't know because I didn't come back telling tales. I gave them results. Results of Korea was I ended up going 5 or 6 times. And I loved the Korean people, still do. And I thought that's where I would be. But Bernard, our general superintendent's mother and father, they had felt the call to go to Korea many years before. And they went to Korea, got a start. I went and Karen, their only little girl, they have a little girl, Chuna, they've adopted, precious person. So what happened is, when I got there, we were preaching a prayer camp outside the edge of Seoul. It was in Incheon, where the invasion took place of Korea a few years before. And after then, we had thousands of people coming. In fact, I don't know if we have any pictures to show you on the screen, but mass baptisms. And that was the first breakthrough they had had, and also that we had had. And I began to love missions. I began to say, how can we support the cause of missions on a better basis than what we do? So there was a man by the name of Oswald Smith. He pastored the People's Church in Canada, Toronto. And he came to Jackson 2 times. They were involved in missions. That church gave, I forget the amount, I think $500,000 a year to support many, many families, just themselves. They were not a gigantic crowd, but they believed in this. So I talked to him. And also I got a card of how they did this stuff. And so I told brother that was the over the foreign missions at that time, we need to get something started on a regular basis. I have this idea, but it's not original. It's called faith promise. By faith, it's just between you and God. If you can't meet it, you'll never get something from the church say you owe what. Between you and God. You make a faith promise, and then that year you fulfill it. That is now the fundraising arm of the United Pentecostal Church, and it has been for many, many years. It started right here in this place. Because you have to have money to reach. Don't worry when people talk about money. Do what you can and pray and let God handle the rest. After that, Brother Howell, who's supposed to be here today, he went to El Salvador. Well, wanted to come preach a crusade. He could tell you the rest of the story better than I could. But we intended to be with him, and we were with him year after year after year until we had to rent stadiums, outdoor arenas, whatever place we could get big enough, because they prayed through by the thousands. Brother Howell is a great missionary and loves missions, and so do I. But the church here probably never knew those details. I'm telling you now that there's a great, great legacy of missions right here. So we want to get involved in it more now than ever before. After then, Buenos Aires was having a meeting in Buenos Aires, and I was to go preach it. Well, I went down there and preached for 4 days and nights in the gymnasium. There was about 100, 150 people that came during the day, and at night we had services. But I had been used to being in the Philippines when our first missionary went there. Often I'd visit Philippines. You have a built-in crowd, you will get some results. Where there's no built-in crowd, what do? So in Buenos Aires, there's hardly anybody there, and they told me 100 baptized believers in all of that giant, beautiful city. Well, we got under a burden for it. I felt like then, that's the boy that was born. Because no one was there to speak of, but it broke loose. And a crippled man on the street came, prayed for, and was healed. And that gym became a gigantic auditorium. And then, just a few years later, they're having a general conference, and Brother Haney asked me to go down. I said, what for? He said, because they want you there. You were there when the big meeting happened. I said, well, other people have been there before, but they want you to come. I prayed about it and thought about it. I didn't go. I told Brother Haney a story, a real joke. I won't tell you. What I told him was a story I'd heard years and years before. Of course, my cousins and everybody was going to the Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, somewhere. And he told a story. This sailor needed some shore leave, and they had berthed in this giant place. He said to his captain, he said, I need some time. I said, why? He said, my wife is giving birth to our first baby. He said, son, you don't have to be there for launching the boat, only for the laying of the keel. No, you can't go. So at Buenos Aires, it seemed like we laid the keel. Now at their conferences, they have over 40,000 people. And many churches have been gone. Why? Because this church had desire to see the cause of missions enlarged, wherever it could be. I still believe giant crusades in major cities is the way to go. It will work, it has worked, and it still work. That way you're not just a little drop in a big pond, you're a big drop in a little pond. And it works, and works fabulous. I'm ready to go. So just name the place and when. And I'll meet you there, and we'll have a giant overflowing revival. This church was established on missions. But instead of staying 2 or 3 days, or 2 or 3 years, I stayed, and so I wanted to make this a launching pad. You can reach the world from one place. Literally, the sun never sets on the churches and the peoples and the nations of the world, because this church has been a giving, a going, and a groaning church for missions. I believe that feeling, tradition, whatever you want to call it, legacy, will still go on, because it's so important that we do reach this world for Christ. My belief is if I could not leave and go, I would at least assist those that were going. I still believe that's the way to do it. Well, I did not do that because I was an official. I did that because I was called of God to do it. And the influence in missions and its endeavors have not stopped since. We love you and love the cause of missions. And I would like to just remind you, and Brother Hal is here, that we have given the last few years $1,698,144.12 to global missions. But that's not what all we can do. We could do a lot more. If coronavirus can reach the world real quick, I think we can reach it. We've got a powerful God, and we've got a wonderful message, and it's good for everybody. We love you. There's a few more tales I can tell, but we'll stop here now. Thank you.